Hi, I'm Jim W6LG for Ham Radio Basics. Welcome to my radio room here on Wolf Mountain. One of the things I've been wanting to talk about, and I'm not sure how to approach it, is the use of slang, jargon, some of it CB radio-ish. And I understand that a lot of us were taught that that's what we were supposed to do. I certainly was in the novice classes that I attended. And perhaps you did too. When I first moved to Nevada County in 1981, I immediately became involved in emergency communications, trying to establish myself in the community. And one of the local fire captains, Charlie Jacobs, KC6LKC, almost immediately approached me and said, "We use plain language." And the more I thought about it and the more he told me about it, the more it made sense. He worked for the California Department of Forestry, now called CAL FIRE, and they communicated with umpteen jurisdictions up and down the state. I don't know how many, but it's hundreds. Each jurisdiction might have had its own 10 code, or there were other things that existed. Some of them actually used the Q signs. So it became a problem for the fire department to talk to a local jurisdiction, because somebody might say 10-7, which in one jurisdiction might be "I'm headed out for lunch" to a dead body in another. So they went to plain language, and they enforced that with all of the jurisdictions that they dealt with. So when I was volunteering with CAL FIRE, CDF, the training was stick with plain language, and it really made sense, because part of the things I got involved in real emergencies, one after the other, during a short period of time. And if you're communicating in plain language, the fire captain you're shadowing, or the member of the board of supervisors that you're shadowing, working with, if he can listen to your handheld, your transceiver, and understand what that person is saying without it having to be interpreted, it's all the better. So if a guy says he's at the location of Smartville Road and Highway 20, and there's a fire that's crossed the highway, which did happen, everybody understands that. If you say your QTH is Smartville and Highway 20, they may not understand what you're saying. Some of that also has crept into single sideband voice communications on HF bands, and I'm not sure why it's being used so much. For example, QSL means "I understood what you said," or "Did you understand what I said?" The Q signs have both a question and a statement. And sometimes it's needed, but it seems to me that a lot of guys are saying QSL 20, 30, 40 times during a contact. And one of the things that I would say is, if you just told the guy he's 5x9, or if I tell you you're 5x9, it really means you're strong and I'm understanding everything you're saying. You don't need to interrogate me every time about QSL. Here's what I mean. The one guy will turn it to the other guy by saying, my handle is Jim, my QTH is Grass Valley. QSL? Well, QSL doesn't exactly mean over, but you don't really need to ask. If you met that person, here's my simile. It's like meeting somebody on the street. If you met a friend on the street, or maybe it would be for the first time, you might say, "Hi, my name is Jim." But you wouldn't say, "Hi, my name is Jim. Did you understand what I said?" And another one that seems to be creeping up a lot is personals. And it sounds kind of funny, because the guy will say, "Well, my personals are," I don't want to know your personals. I'd like to know your name and a signal report, but beyond that, I'll ask you if I want to know. So QSL seems to be every time the guy turns it over, he'd say QSL. Well, you don't need to do that. Once, maybe 15 times, probably too much. Another thing is handle. It's probably better to say my name is Jim instead of my handle is Jim. Or it, implies a nickname. It sounds a little bit like Citizens Band. My personals, I think that's a European thing, but it just sounds kind of odd, and it's one thing to say your name, signal report, location. I don't know that you need to go into personals. Another one that I've heard a lot lately, and it's kind of funny, is whiskeys. I'm running 100 whiskeys. Well, I don't think you are. You may have had a few whiskeys, but I don't think you're running whiskeys. You may be running watts. So you might think about the slang that you're using. Back to emergency communications, and I'm getting towards the end of my time on the video. If you're involved in emergency communications, or if you belong to a group, I highly recommend that you consider plain language, simple English. Everybody understands what you're saying. Because when you're carrying on emergency communications, you may be communicating with one guy to deliver the message, but there may be 10 or 15 other people who are listening on the channel and need that information. So using plain language, everyone can understand. If you start falling into using Q signs or 10 codes or one of those things, then the people who really need to know what's going on, who are depending on your communications, have to ask, what's that guy saying? So by keeping it plain language, everybody understands. And I think that's true also of HF. If we stick with plain language, it really helps the guy you're talking to. And sometimes the guy you're talking to may have very limited English language, and I'm very grateful that a guy in another country whose mother tongue is not English is willing to learn enough English to communicate with me. He may only know enough to give a signal report, his name and location. A lot of Russian guys are that way, for example. And they're really struggling to communicate with us, and we need to make it easy for them to understand by saying, my name is Jim, and your signal report is 5 by 9. Are there times when I've said QTH or QSO, or almost never QSL, but yeah, and usually I think, I shouldn't have done that. So when I'm on the air, I try to stick with plain language. My name is Jim. I'm in Grass Valley. When a guy calls, I'll say, hey, thanks for the call. Nice to hear from you. I don't use whiskeys because I'm running watts, and I don't use the term personals. Those are just a few examples of the kinds of things that are being used on the handbands. I'm just suggesting, again, it's not a rant, I'm just suggesting that you think about using plain language so that the guy you're talking to more easily understands what you're saying. And someone who might be listening, and when you're on the air, there are people who are listening to your conversation. Might be a shortwave listener, might be another ham radio operator. Make it easy on everybody and use plain language, things that are easily understood. All right, probably enough. Probably going to get some hate emails from folks, but just think about it for a few minutes. What would it be like if you just didn't use QSL? Or maybe you use it once instead of 15, 20 times during a contact. You don't need to, the guy doesn't need to confirm every sentence that he understands. If he doesn't understand something, he may say, hey, I didn't understand what transceiver you're using. Anyway, think about it, and if you have a comment, post it below. If you'd like to subscribe, please do that, and let's keep this discourse as civil as we can. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. I'm Jim W6. I started to say, thanks for watching. My handle is Jim QSL 73 W6LG. Bye-bye.